As we know, higher education was once an elite activity confined to socio-economic elites of the society. Whether it is an ancient universities in India such as Nalanda, Takshila, Jagada, Lala, Vallabi, or Odantapuri, or the medieval European university, including the Bologna, Cambridge, Oxford, Paris, etc., the university model of education was serving to the elite section of the society, and it has changed very in the recent past. Massification is an idea, a concept, a stage of higher education development characterized by the massive enrollment of underrepresented group. It's a movement, a transition from an elite system towards a mass higher education system. Thus, the university's elite characteristics is eroded due to the massification of the higher education. Massification here is a historical juncture in any society, particularly society which are characterized by extreme levels of inequality. So India is a good case for arguing that. And before starting the Indian scenario, we should have some basic understanding about the evolution of the education technology. The one thing, as far as the enrollment is concerned, one thing we can see that much of the advanced capitalist countries such as US, Canada, Western Europe, Japan has massified their higher education by early 1960s, 70s and 80s. In the case of US, the country could achieve near universal secondary education by Second World War, that is 1945. And massification of higher education was a reality in US in early 1960s. During the 1960s, India was planning to develop the first national education policy. So you can see a contrast between Indian and the US scenario. In 2005, more than half of the Americans had some kind of a higher education qualification. So what does it mean? It's not a gross enrollment ratio. More than half of the population has some kind of a higher education qualification. In 2012, gross tertiary enrollment ratio in North America and Western Europe together was around 78%. That means more than 3/4 of the students are enrolling in colleges and universities in North America and Western Europe. And more specifically, in the case of US, the gross enrollment ratio in 2012 was 94.68. That means a near universal system of higher education that existed in US in 2012 period. And thereafter, we have been witnessing a continuous decline of enrollment in the US. So that's a different scenario. So here, it is to be noted, this idea of the mass, elite mass and the universal system was first introduced by a Berkeley sociologist and Martin Troll. He first introduced this idea in 1970s in his paper appeared in Dedalus Journal, published by the MIT. The title of the paper was The Reflections on the Transition from Mass to Universal Higher Education. So in 70s, the US higher education system was moving towards a high participation system, and Martin Troll considered a stage from elite to universal higher education system. But in 1973, it was the time he actually codified this schemata of classification of higher education development, and he came up with the idea that higher education development can be classified into elite, mass, and universal. Here, if the gross enrollment ratio is 15% or less, that system is called elite system of higher education. If the gross enrollment ratio crosses 15% and reach up to 50%, we call it as a mass higher education, and more than 50% is called the universal system of higher education. Now, everybody does not agree with this classification, particularly maybe after 2000. This idea of the universal by crossing the 50 percentage has been attracted many criticism from the higher education scholars. But here point is that when the US universities first introduced online courses in 2012, the American higher education system was a universal system of higher education. And this is why in early 1970s, 73, Martin Troe has examined the inherent tensions in the US university. So he found that the continuing unrest by the black, quote unquote, black students in the US university is it should be seen as a effect of heightened tension between autonomous and popular functions of American colleges and universities. So what is this? The autonomous and the popular functions of universities. As we know, as we are following the Humboldtian model of research university, the autonomous function, now the foundational function of university model of higher education is teaching and research. But American university system has added one more layer to that research university model, that is the service to society. During the massification stage, there is a heightened tension between these two roles. One is to take care of the research and the teaching. Secondly, there is a pressure on university to respond back to society or address the societal concerns and ensure some kind of an equity in access to higher education. This societal kind of responsibility actually lead to some kind of a tension in US universities. That is the root cause of the unrest in the US universities in 1960s and 70s. And Martin Troe make a clear statement. We are now seeing what was a privilege that become a right, transformed into something very near to an obligation for growing number of young men and women. So it was the higher education enrollment was once an elite preserve. It was converted into, it was has been converted into a kind of a right. Now it is an obligation. Obligation can have two different notions. One is it is the obligation of the state to provide higher education. That is a one type of obligation. The second obligation, it is a responsibility of the student to be a lifelong learner. So I am not going to those discussion right now. Anyway, so this basic understanding is very important when we go ahead with the Indian scenario. Where does India stands? We need to acknowledge the fact that the India's current GR in 2022, as per the available statistics, it is 28.4%. So among the 18 to 23 age group, only 28 students are going to colleges and university in 2022. And as per the target of the National Education Policy 2020, we aim to enhance gross enrollment ratio to 50% by 35. So you just see the contrast between the US and India. And during 2012, when the two major initiative has taken place in the domain of the edutech, that's one is the Coursera, second is the edX. One Stanford and MIT has taken the lead. During this 2012, India was just touching 15% of the gross enrollment ratio and becoming and entering into an early phase of massification. This context is very important. Sorry. Okay. Then after 2012, this edutech experiment has been initiated by the Stanford and the MIT, and later it was introduced as a not-for-profit initiative. Later it became a market mechanism. So what we see now as a edutech, big fives, etc. In 2012 onwards, American higher education has witnessed decline. So annual rate of decline of enrollment is around 1.4. That means by the year of 2014, there will be a 13% decline from 2010. So that is the one estimate, according to one estimate. So here point is that the enrollment in American colleges and universities were declining when edutech industry has blossomed in US or take shape in the US. And then look at the Indian case. In India, the higher education started in 1857, but up to 2015, higher education system continued to be an elite system of higher education, largely serving students from the elite background, those who are come the upper social strata and the economic strata. And only in the mid of 2010, India moves into a system of massification by enrolling more number of non-traditional students. This was the crucial time India began to think about the technology-based learning. So this is very important. The US thought about the possibility of a technology-based learning and edutech when the US enrollment started declining after reaching a universal stage. But in India, we are just moving from a elite to massification stage. In that crucial stage, when the doors of colleges and universities are open to the downtrodden and the disadvantaged social groups and the economic class, then we started discussing about the possibilities of enhancing education and improving learning outcome through the education and technology. So what is then technology? So technology can be described in three different ways. One is technology is something called an artifact or a device. The technology itself and how it is designed and made. The second is technology as an activities and practice. It involves what people do with the technology. And third is the context, that is the social arrangements and organizational forms that surround the use of technology, including the institutional structures, social structure, and cultures that shaping the use of technology. For example, if you take the case of a textbook, this I am taking from the Selvin's book in 2011. If you take the case of a textbook, the material of a textbook, that is the hard copy of the book, is the human artifact. That's the one element. But the second element, how many pages are there, etc., who published, all those things. And second thing is that this is a book. That means it requires some kind of a competency and the skills to read the book. The literacy is required to read. So for an activity of reading, we need some kind of a qualification and prerequisite skills, etc. And this textbook can be used for a passive learning and for an active learning, depending upon the transaction model followed by the teacher and the school or the college. And third is the context in which these particular books are produced and used in an education scenario. And we can see that what becomes an official knowledge through a pedagogic process in education, and whose voices are represented or privileged, whose voices and life words are silenced in the curriculum is an important context of that particular textbook. So we can look at the technology just as a material and human artifact, and secondly as an activity and the practices, thirdly as the socio-political context in which technology operate and shape the society and learning. We primarily see education technology as a technology and its materiality. And we have a limited understanding of technology as an activity and practice and socio-cultural context in which technology is operated, leading to a repercussion on the societal progress. According to National Education Policy 2020, technology has been identified as one of the major tools for improving access and learning outcome. It is not confined to technology integration in education is not confined to student learning, but also professional development of teachers also have been included in the ambit of edutech and the tech or technology based learning. This is the way national education policy visualize the role of education and technology. Following this broader guidelines of the national education policy, three major changes have been made by the University Grants Commission. They are first, the students are allowed to earn 40% of the credit from online platforms. That is the first policy decision taken by UGC in favor of platformization, because before that regulation, you can use platforms for learning, for an informal learning, but your learning will not be counted or calculated in the distribution of the degree or accumulation of the credit. This has been changed by the UGC guideline. That means 40% of the credit can be accumulated from the online platform, and they are not saying that whether it is a private or public. So this is, I will be touching upon that issue later. And the second, students are allowed to pursue two study programs simultaneously. So somebody is doing a bachelor degree in one particular discipline, he or she can also join for an online program, simultaneously pursue two degree program. This is also very major policy change in favor of platform based education. Third is multiple entry exit. I will discuss that point. And so as of now, the policy tried to see education technology and education platforms are the solutions for some of the major problems. So I would like to change the lens towards what are the problems generated by the education technology. For that, we need to first understand one thing. What are the problems which can be addressed by integrations of platform into formal system of education? We have to ask this fundamental question before entering into the debate of the use and pros and cons of the digital technology. Of course, value extraction, profit maximization, etc., has been and voluntarily discussed and largely discussed in the discussion of the edutech. So I'm not going to touch upon that. But what is exactly platformization means? How platform is different from platformization of higher education? I am aware that we are using a now technical platform to organize this talk, and you are joining from different part of the world. So this platform provide an opportunity. But platformization is not simply an opportunity for learning, but platformization is a process by which the education is integrated into a global digital infrastructure and allowing its promoters to extract value from its digital content and user data. So this context, this definition is very important while we're discussing about the platform and the platformization. So I am talking about the how platforms have been integrated into the formal system of higher education. What are the implications of that particular form of platformization? And I'm not going to touch upon the issues of the well-known critic of the edutech, such as the datafication, learnification, issues of data privacy, etc. That is not my major concern now. My major concern is regarding how are platforms integrated into the higher education system. As I mentioned earlier, there should be some kind of a policy shift in order to facilitate platformization process, because the degree awarding is a responsibility of the universities and the professoriate. It cannot be given to the anybody coming outside the university. So that is how we visualize the university model of higher education. So this model does not allow any kind of acquisition of credit from the online source. That's why UGC has first changed the guideline in favor of the platform, and that has led to the platformization of higher education. Then we try to unpack how this policy shift impact the question of equity in higher education, because any policy does not take place in a social and political vacuum. So here there is a discourse has been developed that the access to technology is the problem and digital literacy and ownership of the gadget are the solution. This idea is popular among the educationists and the policy makers, but there is an inherent problem, an inherent weakness in this idea of technology is the problem and the digital literacy or the ownership of the gadget is the solution. Because this idea of solutionism undermines the changing character of education due to platformization. Due to the platformization, the basic character of education is being changed. So therefore, the traditional approaches in understanding inequality in higher education are inadequate to comprehend and explain emerging forms of inequalities in higher education. So there are two major concerns. Firstly, how the integration of education into a global digital infrastructure contests the institutional pedagogical autonomy of colleges and universities. This is the first concern. The second concern is how the integration of digital platform with the educational practices in classroom challenges the professional pedagogical autonomy of the teachers. The third element is how this platformization actually impacts students and the concerns of equity. In order to address this question, we need to start from the foundational question of what is the purpose of education. So following the Dirk Bista, I would like to explain here the three major functions of education, all levels of education, including the higher education. One is the qualification, because universities and colleges certifies and provides degrees and diplomas saying that this person is competent enough to do something. So that is a qualification function. And secondly, socialization function. The university also provides space for socialization. In a liberal democracy, this space of socialization is very, very important. And third is the subjectification process. The qualification and socialization are two important purposes, but that actually making individuals to fit into the existing social order and preparing them for existing social and economic roles. Contrarily, the subjectification is a opposite to socialization and the qualification functions of education. It is a process. Subjectification is a process of becoming an autonomous individual, an independent human being by acquiring education. It's a process of a self formation. This self-formation is the heart of the education process. Here the question, how platformization engage with these three purposes of education: qualification, socialization, and the subjectification. Of course, the market defined qualifications are the primary delivery of the education technology. They rarely address the second function, socialization, and there is less attempt for the third element, that is the subjectification. So the platforms are primarily used to gain qualifications and competencies, and as a result of that, all these edutech courses are demand absorbing courses. The students need that in order to compete in the labor market. So that is the only consideration in the most cases. So students are partially socialized into discipline and profession by creating a community of practice through the some of the edutech opportunities, but largely it's focusing on the qualification function. So then there are three major tension. I'm trying to link it with the three major tension. How platformization of higher education actually exacerbating these three tensions in higher education, as mentioned by Simon. The one is the individualism versus community. Second is independence versus interdependence. Third is flexibility versus structure. Whether and how much to emphasize individual or the community, and what kind of balance is to be attained between the focus of individual and community is one of the major consideration in higher education. And as we know, the idea of a university has originated from the word, Latin word universitas. Universitas means that it's a community of scholars. So there should be a balance of development of the individualism and development of communities. And as we could see that in the oppressions and discrimination, etc., continue to take place in university, in particularly in residential universities. Why it is happening in the residential universities? So mainly because we are not able to create an inclusive community in colleges and universities. So these are the main places where we get immediate reflection of that disruption of the community or non-creation of the community in colleges and universities. And second, because of the technological intervention, this inherent tension between the individualism and the community will be exacerbated. The reason is that education technology in its current form primarily address the individual requirement, and the collective requirement of the community, etc., has not been addressed by existing models of edu technology. The second is the independence and the interdependent. And as we know, it's primarily an issue of a nature of knowledge. As we know, we are living in a society where knowledge production or new knowledge is produced at the intersections of different disciplines, and we can see a hybrid of science and technology disciplines, biotechnology or nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, etc. You can see the combination of different disciplines which were actually separate for a long time. Now we are seeing a scenario of integration of different disciplines. Now a system is moving, and knowledge production is moving from independence to interdependence. But technology, particularly in the pedagogical context, the platformization actually makes a break in the university's provision of the educational opportunities. What does it mean? When credits can be acquired from an external source, then the students will be taking a certain courses from certain edutech or the online platform. Another part will be from their own parent colleges. So that means in a college, suppose all the humanities courses can be acquired from a online platform, then in that particular college, for that particular student, there is no interaction with the humanities department of particular college, because he is allowed to take a credit from online platform, so he can take a sociology course from anywhere else. He does not has to engage with the discipline, the department, and because it's very important in a knowledge creation, in a transdisciplinary kind of a knowledge production process. Interaction between the disciplines are important. So this vibrant opportunity for the students to interact with the different disciplines and the students are very foundational for developing a vibrant community of students. This is being challenged by the promotion of the platform. And thirdly, flexibility versus structure. This is largely applicable to the labor process in universities. As we can see, now the teaching position has been a contractual kind of a opportunity, job opportunity. There is no a permanent employment system. So India is also moving towards that contractualization of teaching job. And we can also take this idea into the student side also. And how actually we are promoting this flexibility with respect to structure. So there are four types of flexibility that is enabled by the platform. The first is the students are now allowed to accumulate 40% credit from online platform. Second, flexibility in terms of pursuing more than one degree. And thirdly, flexibility in terms of choice of subject, or that's a liberal arts model of education. And fourthly, flexibility in terms of entry and exit. Any structure in place in principle makes institution and its unit accountable for students. The structure and formal system of student support are integral for promoting equity. When system is massified and larger number of non-traditional students are entering into higher education, we certainly need a structure that's supporting the student from a disadvantaged social and educational background. Here, the notion of flexibility becomes a tool for transferring the onus of student success from colleges and teachers to students themselves. This is the political change and the philosophical change that has happened due to the proliferation of the platform technology in an era of massification. When UGC decide the multiple entry and exit, there is no failures, there is no dropout, because students can continue for 1 year. They can go with a diploma or a certificate or advanced degree, etc. So there is no dropping out in or the left out in the colleges. That's the one thing. And secondly, you can see that sorry, okay. So then coming to the concluding points, the platformization actually exacerbating the existing inequalities in higher education in the following way. Unlike the developed advanced capitalist countries, platformization of education in India took shape in a critical juncture of transition from elite to mass higher education. This historical context has not been adequately addressed or taken care while we promoting education technology in Indian higher education. This proliferation of the digital platform co-accord with the massification of higher education. And we can classify then maybe technology into a collectivist learning or content driven learning, two type of learning. And the collectivist or connectivist learning actually talking about the peer driven learning, knowledge co-construction. The open educational resources are part of that collectivist or the connectivist kind of learning. But the second is the learning content driven learning that bearing a credit. That is what we can acquire credits from a online platform. So this acquisition of the credit from the online platform, that's what I call the platformization of education, actually trying to legitimize social inequality by telling that the students are responsible for their own success and failure. There is no responsibility, in principle, there is no responsibility for the universities and the colleges and the teaching community on the student, because the students are not completely confined to particular college, because nearly half of the credit can be taken from outside. So university will not take any responsibility. And EduTech does not differentiate students based on their social group categorization or their educational disadvantage. For them, every student is almost like an equal student. So that's why nowhere the equity concerns will be addressed. So this process of platformization in favor of more in favor of qualification is detrimental to imagining a relationship rich and inclusive campus and classroom. So the concluding point is that in a specific historical context of massification of higher education, platformization is more likely to exacerbate inequalities. In India, we actually need more structure and more support system for empowering the student from the disadvantaged group, as students are now entering from a very diverse and disadvantaged social and economic group. In this particular moment, we are translating the responsibility of success from universities and teachers on students. If students are not able to find a job, are not employable, it is their fault to get a required online credits from a good edutech platform, or they have taken a wrong course. So this is the way the responsibility of the student failure or success is translated transported from the teachers and colleges to university. So that's why I would like to end with a question. We need to ask a foundational question. What are the kind of problem technology is going to address? The technology is the solution for everything, as a panacea for everything, does not tell anything about what are the specific educational problems educational technology and educative platforms are going to address. Without understanding this particular, the question of what are the problems they are going to address, we will not be able to develop an education technology that is conducive for students from all background or the characteristics. And here there is a broad consensus on the technology enabled learning. It indicates that how individualization of inequalities are legitimized. This has happened through the policy process. The national education policy has discussed about introduced about the need for using technology for improving access, improving learning outcome, and consequent changes have been made in the UGC guideline in order to promote the platformization of higher education. So our question should be, what are the foundational educational problem that platforms are going to address? It may not be directly visible from the policy documents and the UGC guideline. So, as a critical research scholar, we need to derive what is the assumptions and the beliefs behind the proposed solution of technology is the solution for expanding access and improving learning. So the role of critical educational scholars is to examine and test the claim that education technology can resolve all kind of problem and it's a panacea, or education, the platformization of higher education can be a positive development in an era of massification.